Hello and welcome to People and Profit, where we look at how business shapes our world. I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up, seeking growth in Greece. Can the country's already battered economy survive another round of austerity? Billed as the biggest overhaul of America's financial system in more than half a century, but 5 years on, have the DoddFrank reforms made any difference? And they're catchy, sometimes annoying, but they can be worth millions. We'll be asking what makes the perfect advertising jingle. First, though, to Greece, where the banks have reopened, but the country's economic crisis remains far from resolved. Small businesses there say limits on cash withdrawals and foreign bank transfers are suffocating them. This at a time when unemployment in Greece is the highest in the European Union, with more than 1 in 4 people out of work. Well, let's start this week in Athens to hear more about the situation there. And we can speak to Natalie Contu. 2 years ago, she set up a tour guide business called Athens Insiders with 2 friends who were having difficulty finding jobs. Natalie, thank you for speaking to us, first of all. Tell us about the experience 2 years ago when you set up your company. Not the best time to be setting up a business in Greece.
Hello from Greece. That's true, Stephen. The things 2 years ago, it was the start of the crisis and things were very uncertain. A lot of the young people were unemployed and, they were very scared about the future and what's going to head on. So during that time, I was abroad looking for a better future, and at that period, my future colleagues start brainstorming about creating their own business due to the problem of being unemployed. And that is when the Insiders were actually created. And
tell us how things have changed for you and your business in the past few weeks and months as we've seen Greece's bigger debt crisis unfold. How has that affected you?
Thank God we haven't got a serious problem. Bookings may have slowed generally, but we didn't have any cancellation. The problem was as for everyday, transactions, because as there was a withdrawal limit of 60 euro, it was really hard to pay the people that you collaborated with. You couldn't pay the wages of your employees, or you couldn't transact with businesses abroad. So this was kind of hard, and it is because the withdrawal limit is still on.
And for paying your workers, how does that work? Have you been able to pay everyone this far?
We are very hopeful that the people that we're employing are also our friends. So they're showing some, patience of the situation. And then we have paused the wages until things look, much better and we could pay them.
And are you hopeful that things will improve soon there?
Yes, the only thing you can do is stay positive, and that's our philosophy, trying to go through every little problem that is being created, and we are being positive.
Natalie Contu, thank you very much for your time. That's Natalie Contu there from Athens Insiders. Of course, small businesses are often called the engine of the economy. But let's take a look now at what the bigger picture is in Greece. And for that, we can turn to Sonny Kapoor, who's the managing director of the think tank Redefine, but also an economist who's been an advisor to, among others, the European Commission and the International Monetary Fund. Sonny Kapoor, thank you for joining us. Can we start, first of all, we've heard that Greece needs more austerity, Greece needs more reforms. Is there actually any chance, under the current circumstances, for Greece to actually be able to grow its economy?
The short answer, unfortunately, is with the current terms of the programme, in the current uncertain environment, the answer has to be no. Greece cannot grow and will not grow unless things are relaxed, unless the pace of austerity is relaxed, unless the prospect of Grexit is completely removed from the horizon, and unless the banks are allowed to start operating normally. So I think that the near-term prospects, particularly with the added austerity, the added increase in value-added taxes, capital controls, for the Greek economy are very poor. But assuming things go according to plan, which so far, touch wood, they seem to be, within a few months, Greece can start growing again. And there can actually even be quite a strong cyclical recovery, because a lot of economic activity has been postponed. People have been sitting at the sidelines. Consumers have not been consuming. Investors have not been investing. But the completion of a successful review of the first phase of the program, let's say by November this year, combined with a clear signal about more debt relief for Greece, less austerity in the short term, and a little bit relaxation of the excessive conditions that have been imposed. These are huge, enormous positive signs that will make consumer activity, that will make investor activity pick up.
Well, that was to be my next question. Surely for consumers to be able to spend more in the Greek economy, they're going to need some help as well.
Absolutely. But I mean, it has been a very tough 5 years. Unemployment rates being where they are, the steady, very substantial decrease in pensions, in welfare payments, as well as salary decreases, etc., have taken its toll on what the Greek consumer can actually consume sustainably, and particularly now with the additional choking of credit. So you can't even consume on borrowed money. That is a huge problem. So the idea behind the program is, yes, Greek domestic demand will come back and pick part of the slack back, but the success of the program is dependent a lot more on growth of exports in Greece, of the kind that we're seeing, for example, in Ireland and Portugal. Now, structurally, that's a problem because the Greek economy is very different. It doesn't have these manufactured exports, etc. It doesn't have the basic infrastructure in place to benefit from an export boom, and which is why investment is hugely important. There is a program for additional investment at some concessional terms from the European Investment Bank and the structural funds at the European Commission. There are investors, including, unfortunately and fortunately, pension funds and distressed investors and vulture funds that are looking particularly at Greek companies that have been ground down. So there is potentially, depending on how things go, a wall of money that could flow into Greece, could put in place investment, and could replace, should replace some of the domestic demand that has been eroded by the poor state of the Greek consumer, the poor state of Greek employment, and hopefully contribute to economic growth and GDP growth.
And would you put a time frame on it? When should we see a recovery in Greece? If
a recovery were going to happen, if things were going to go to plan, I wouldn't be surprised to see a recovery in Greek GDP, even a potentially substantial one, partly because so much of it has been ground down as early as the first quarter of next year.
That's very optimistic indeed. Sonny Kapoor from the think tank Redefine, thank you very much for your time and for speaking to us today from London.
Thank you.
We're going to turn now to something completely different in the United States. And it's been 5 years since the Congress there passed the most sweeping reform of its financial sector in 80 years. The DoddFrank Act changed rules for banks and introduced new protection for consumers. But half a decade later, many of those reforms still haven't been implemented. We'll look at the details in a moment. But first, let's hear what President Obama had to say just after the law was passed by the Senate in 2010.
This reform puts in place the strongest consumer financial protections in history, and it creates a new consumer watchdog to enforce those protections. Because of this reform, the American people will never again be asked to foot the bill for Wall Street's mistakes. There will be no more taxpayer-funded bailouts, period. If a large financial institution should ever fail, this reform gives us the ability to wind it down without endangering the broader economy. And there will be new rules to end the perception that any firm is too big to fail.
So what is in the Dodd-Frank Act, and has it done what it's supposed to? Well, William Hildebrandt is here to explain. Well,
Stephen, the U.S. government wanted a safeguard after the 2008 global financial crisis that was signed in 2010 by Barack Obama. Behind him, the two congressmen, Chris Dodd and Barney Frank. Now, the goal was to boost the economy, promote financial stability, and protect consumers. That came in the form of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau the brainchild of Senator Elizabeth Warren, overseeing banks, credit unions, and other financial companies. Since it was formed in 2011, the watchdog has received more than 500,000 complaints and returned billions of dollars to consumers that were treated unfairly. Another key component is the Volcker rule, limiting how banks can invest and the relationships. The goal was to end lots of risky, speculative trading, preventing banks from becoming too big to fail, all in hopes of ending government-funded bailouts by taxpayers. But 5 years on, some are wondering if DoddFrank itself is too big not to fail. Only 2/3 of its measures have been enacted, and some wonder if the remaining ones will see the light of day. Annual stress tests on banks are meant to simulate market crisis scenarios, and living wills are plans to show how lenders could be dissolved orderly to avoid a bankruptcy fiasco like Lehman Brothers in 2008. But it's unclear how any of these steps will hold up until there actually is another crisis. Stephen?
OK, we'll have to wait and see. Thank you, William, for that. Next, they're the little tunes that we love to hate. Jingles have been a staple of advertising for decades, but when brands hit the right note, they can be a goldmine. Here in France, the well-known music that accompanies railway station announcements has even inspired a song by Pink Floyd's Dave Gilmour. So what makes a jingle stick? Well, Lauren Berstecker has been finding out.
Familiar, catchy, and almost impossible to ignore, these jingles are worth millions in sales. And they've become part of our daily lives.
French railways.
I hear this and I'm expecting my train to be late.
Companies can spend up to 200,000 euros for the right jingle. But is there a formula to create the perfect tune? This company produces and sells jingles to over 350 brands. Its golden rule: whether a few notes or a full song, a good jingle must introduce an emotional attachment to the product and underline its main qualities.
If we talk about cars, this track doesn't rely on the usual theme of power and so on. Here we have something that's more aspirational, that makes you think of the open road.
Jingles have become an essential part of modern advertisement, and it doesn't matter whether you love or hate them, so long as you recognize them.
And of course, we're always here too. You can contact the team on our Facebook page, France 24 Business, or you can tweet me as well at NewsStephen. That's all for this People in Profit. We'll see you next time.